What you are about to hear is a story about absence, about what it means when the most carefully watched woman in the world spends an entire week in a country and leaves behind absolutely nothing for anyone to find. No photograph, no doorstep moment, no blurry paparazzi shot from across the street, no wave from a car window, nothing. And in a family whose entire history is built on what gets photographed and what does not, that nothing is the story. Hello, friends. My name is James, and you are watching Royal Daily Report, your number one source for the most exclusive and most shocking royal stories on the internet. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now because tonight we are telling the story that every royal commentator has been circling around without fully landing on. The story of Meghan's invisible UK visit and what that invisibility actually means. And if you have been with us from the beginning, you already know. We never hold back. We never pull back. Let us get into it. And before we go one single word further, if you are not subscribed to Royal Daily Report, you are missing the most important royal analysis anywhere on the internet right now. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. Because this story is moving faster than anything we have covered this year, and you cannot afford to miss a single update. Subscribe now. Let us get into it. Let us start with what is actually confirmed. Because in a story this layered and this contested, it matters enormously to be clear about what we know for certain before we get into what we think it means. What is confirmed is this. Harry and Meghan brought Archie and Lilibet to the United Kingdom. Charles and Camilla met the family at Highgrove for what the palace described only as a private occasion. No photographs were released to any outlet. No statement beyond the barest confirmation that the meeting happened at all. The children reportedly arrived separately from Meghan, not as one unified family walking through the same door at the same moment. A detail that is itself unusual and unexplained and worth sitting with before we get to anything else. Harry appeared publicly throughout the week, at Invictus Foundation events, in front of cameras, visible, accessible, present in the way that public figures are present when they are not actively avoiding being seen. And Harry also walked into a courtroom and lost his privacy case against the publisher of the Daily Mail. A real confirmed court loss, with legal costs reported in the region of £50 million when both sides are accounted for. Harry called the ruling a complete and obvious whitewash in those exact words to reporters directly outside the courthouse. His words, said publicly, on camera, in full view. And Meghan was nowhere near any of it. Was nowhere near any camera at any point during the entire visit. That is what is confirmed. Now let us talk about what it means. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now because the three theories that explain Meghan's total absence, and why all three of them might be true at exactly the same time, is coming right now. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Subscribe now. Theory 1 is the fear theory, and it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed as commentary that is simply uncomfortable to sit with. Meghan has spent years arguing publicly and legally that the United Kingdom is not safe for her family. This is not a casual comment made once in passing. It is a sustained legal position that went all the way to court. A position built on the argument that she and Harry require a specific level of security protection that they are not receiving as private citizens. Now consider the bind that position creates for her the moment she steps into public view. If the crowd reaction is warm and welcoming, that single moment of warmth quietly and immediately undermines years of carefully constructed legal argument. Because a warm crowd does not need extraordinary security measures. A warm crowd does not validate the position that showing up in the UK represents a genuine safety risk. And if the crowd reaction is hostile, if there are audible boos, if there are visible signs of anger, if the moment is caught on camera and clipped and shared and replayed, that footage follows her into every headline about this family for years. There is no version of stepping into public view during this specific week that resolves cleanly in her favor. Not one. And when both available outcomes work against you, the only move that avoids both simultaneously is to not show up at all. And neither outcome ever gets the chance to happen. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now because Theory 2 is the one that changes everything about how you read this entire visit. And you need to be subscribed to get our full coverage when the next development breaks. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Subscribe now. Theory 2 is the documentary theory, and it reframes basically everything else we have already discussed. There are reports that a documentary project connected to Harry is in some stage of development. Reports that a visit to Althorpe House, the Spencer family estate where Diana is buried, may be connected to that project in some way. And Charles Spencer himself has made a public statement acknowledging interest around a potential visit of this kind. Now consider what that means for Meghan's total absence from every camera during this trip. If documentary footage is part of what is being gathered, if these days in the UK are at least partially about capturing material for a future release, then Meghan's invisibility stops being about fear or avoidance and starts being about something entirely different. About controlling what gets filmed and when and in what context. About making sure that the footage that eventually surfaces does so on her terms at a time and in a format of her choosing. Not scooped by a stray phone camera on a random Tuesday that nobody planned for. A woman whose entire public career runs on controlled angles and carefully produced content does not accidentally disappear from every camera in an entire country. She disappears because disappearing right now is exactly what the strategy requires. And when the footage eventually surfaces, when the documentary eventually appears, the absence will make sense. Because the absence was the documentary being made. Theory 3 is the one that our source says people closest to this story find most persuasive. And it is the theory that explains not just Meghan's absence, but the entire shape of a visit that has not added up cleanly from any angle. Theory 3 is that Harry and Meghan are not fully aligned on what this trip was actually for. That Harry genuinely wants his children connected to their grandfather in a way that feels increasingly urgent given Charles's health. That the Highgrove meeting was genuinely about a father and his grandchildren and the particular human urgency of a sick man running out of time with 2 children who live 5,000 miles away. And that Meghan's interest in returning to the institution she left, in stepping back into the physical space of the country that broke her, is considerably less than Harry's. That what looked like one shared family visit was actually 2 people with 2 genuinely different underlying motivations running the same trip for different reasons. And that the misalignment produced exactly what we saw. Harry fully visible and fully present throughout the week. Meghan absent from every frame. Because 2 people who do not fully agree on the point of a visit are going to keep producing visits that do not add up cleanly from the outside, no matter how many carefully worded joint statements eventually get issued to smooth over the inconsistency. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now because here is the thing about all 3 of these theories that makes this story so significant. They do not cancel each other out. They can all be true at exactly the same time. Subscribe now. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Because what we are covering next, the financial pressures on the Invictus Foundation, what the court loss means for the Sussex brand, and what our source says is coming next from both Harry and Meghan separately, is all coming in our next video. Subscribe now. The comparison that matters most in this story is not Meghan versus Diana. That comparison gets reached for automatically in every royal story, whether it fits or not. The comparison that actually illuminates something useful is Meghan versus Harry in the exact same 7-day window. Side by side, Harry walked into a courtroom, lost publicly and decisively, said something pointed and quotable on the way out to a bank of waiting cameras, and walked away with his dignity bruised but visible and intact. He took a public hit and processed it in full view. Meghan spent the exact same week making herself functionally impossible to hit in the first place, removing the possibility entirely rather than absorbing any impact. One of those approaches is visible. One of those approaches leaves nothing for anyone to point a lens at. And in a family whose entire currency for decades has been about what gets photographed and what does not, choosing to be the one person who leaves 0 visual evidence behind for an entire multi-day trip is a choice. Not an accident. Not bad timing. A choice made with the particular discipline of someone who has calculated every available outcome and concluded that the only safe one is the one where there is nothing to calculate. When one single theory explains an absence this complete, that is simply a reasonable guess. When 3 completely separate and largely unrelated theories all independently predict the exact same blank space in the public record, that blank space stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like the single most efficient outcome available, regardless of which specific motivation was driving it. And perhaps regardless of whether any single person fully understands all three motivations that were running simultaneously underneath the same surface decision. Do not show up. Leave nothing. Control everything. What is left when you strip away every theory and every piece of speculation is simple enough to say in a single sentence. Harry came to the United Kingdom and was seen by everyone. Meghan came or did not come, depending on which report you believe, and left behind nothing for anyone to see. In a story that has always been about visibility, about who gets to be seen and how and on whose terms. Choosing to be completely invisible for an entire week in the country that made her famous is itself the most visible thing Meghan Markle has done in years. And the question of why she made that choice, fear, strategy, documentary, disagreement, or all four at once, is the question that nobody in the royal world has fully and satisfyingly answered yet. That is all for tonight, friends. I am James, and this has been Royal Daily Report. If this story hit different for you tonight, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on those notifications because we are covering every single development in this story as it happens. Share this tonight with someone who has been following this visit and who deserves the full picture, not just the comfortable version. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay royal. Goodbye, friends.